This video looks at the future of jobs post the COVID-19 pandemic. The video is a lecture taken from my online course, Future Skills 2030, Prepare for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Enjoy the lecture. So let's look at the future of jobs post COVID-19. Now, the global COVID-19 pandemic was a shock to the world in 2020 and 2021. And the extent of the disruption in our lives took us all by surprise. So what is the impact of the pandemic on the future of work? Now in this lecture we're going to be covering how the pandemic will impact the future of jobs. And by the end of the lecture you're going to have an understanding how COVID is impacting on everything we've looked at so far in this course. How the pandemic is interacting with the technologies of the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the skills we need to build for the future of work. Now, some commentators refer to the COVID-19 pandemic as a black swan event. Now, these black swan events are low probability, high impact events that can dramatically alter the course of history. Now, Nassim Nicholas Taleb coined the concept in his 2007 book, The Black Swan, and it refers to an event that comes as a big surprise, just as sightings of black swans in Australia astonished the Europeans who first landed on the continent. Up to that point, they believed that all swans were white. Now, the discovery changed the way we think about swans forever. Black swan events are incidents considered to be extremely unlikely to occur, and when they do happen, they shake our perceptions and certainties. Now the thing is, Taleb himself describes the pandemic as a white swan because of course the pandemic was entirely predictable to those who looked carefully and thought seriously about these issues. For example, we've had plagues and pandemics before, such as the Black Death, which was a devastating global epidemic of bubonic plague that struck Europe and Asia in the mid-1300s. We also had the Spanish flu in 1918, and even since then we've had others such as SARS and MERS, even though these didn't spread globally. But today, of course, we're vastly more connected if you compare now to back in 1918 with the Spanish flu. You know, people just jump on a plane and you're on the other side of the world. So it's easy to predict or to see how a disease could spread globally. Now, people did actually predict a global pandemic. For example, have a look at Bill Gates' talk from March 2015, where he makes a plea that we need to get ready for the next global epidemic. And you can see a link to that talk in the resources. In this course then we have seen megatrends. We've seen globalization, we've seen digitization and technologies of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. We've seen demographic and climate change, which are transforming learning and jobs and the way societies function. Now the pandemic crisis has interacted with these trends in complex ways by accelerating some, such as for example the shift to remote working, while slowing others, at least in the short term anyway, such as the global flows of people and goods. Now overall the pandemic has fast forwarded the future of work. Now we were already on a path prior to the pandemic, to changes, and we've looked at those changes, but now things have accelerated. The trend towards automation and AI will be accelerated post-pandemic for the simple reason that robots don't get sick. So a less human warehouse system, for example, means that if a co-worker calls in sick, half the workers won't have to be sent on compulsory quarantine. In another example, let's look at home working. Now, millions of people and businesses around the world had to change overnight, moving from office to home working and from interactions that occurred in person to interactions that occurred mainly online. Now, COVID-19 has been like an extraordinary experiment where we're all just forced to suddenly change and work remotely within a week or two. Now, thankfully, we were able to use the whole range of digital tools, for example, such as Zoom, and we moved from the physical world to the digital world, and the technologies were already in place to allow that shift. And of course, we've looked at some of these technologies. for example, cloud computing. Now, this shift might have taken decades if it had been planned, but instead it took place in only days or weeks. Even as people return to the office in 2021 and 2022, things will never be the same again. Now, video conferencing is certainly going to be more common, and traveling for work is going to be less so. And while some people will work full-time from the office or from home, most of us will be blended workers, working sometimes from the office and other times at home or from a digital hub or on the go. Now we're going to land in a place where there's a blend of working from home and working online or in a digital space. And there are great benefits to being present physically, and people can form relationships to get to know each other. They can build trust so that it's easy to, for example, ask for help with a task because you trust that person and you know that person. Now, there are also particular nuances to face-to-face interactions to discuss, for example, particularly sensitive issues. Of course, there are other advantages to working digitally because you don't have to move from one place to another or you're location independent. Now, digital work is independent of a physical space. It's a shared digital environment used by a team with all the various tools that workers use to get things done. With less travel, there's going to be less emissions because of a reduction in travel and commuting, and a smaller real estate footprint with lower construction and operational emissions. And this is an important consideration in a time where we can all see the effects of climate change. And all you have to do is to turn on the news and you're going to hear about floods and wildfires and extreme weather events. For example, in the summer of 2021, the flooding in Germany, in Belgium and the Netherlands, and also in London and Turkey. So it seems these extreme weather events are becoming more and more common and more widespread. Now, climate change is, of course, the biggest challenge that we face as humanity, and the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report in August 2021 gives a very stark warning that humanity needs to take urgent action now to avoid the worst of the crisis. Now, I've put a link to that report in the resources. So anything we can do to cut emissions and cut travel is a step in the right direction. So the best solution overall then is to combine the advantages and benefits from each of working remotely or working in person into a hybrid model using both digital and physical work, and that's where we're going to head to. So in the post-pandemic world, if you don't have IT skills, you're certainly at greater risk of having your wages fall relative to other people. Now, digital skills are important as we work from home. As I mentioned, we will land at a place where there's a blend of working from home and working online or in a digital space. Now let's look at biotechnology. Now, for years, there's been talk of how biotechnology would form a crucial part of the fourth industrial revolution, and its response to the pandemic has proved that this is not just hype. It has been staggering how quickly vaccines were developed and produced, and genome sequencing has made it possible to identify mutations of the coronavirus. So we're really seeing the developments in biotechnology and the speed at which those vaccines have been developed. Overall, COVID-19 has forced us to rethink the way we work, how we shop, the role of government, how the economy works at a national and global level. In terms of the future of work as a society, we need to help people transition to new jobs, to upgrade their skills, and that need is much greater now than in the pre-pandemic world. We were already on this path prior to the pandemic, but now things have accelerated. And the biggest area to build capacity is in reskilling and upskilling, and building our capacity to learn is a huge priority. Now let's look at some of the latest statistics. According to McKinsey Global Institute, and you can see a link to that report in the resources, 100 million workers in 8 countries studied will need to make transitions to new occupations by 2030. And that's 25% more than expected before the pandemic. Now, these countries that they looked at were the USA, Germany, UK, China, France, Japan, Spain and India. Now, not everyone is going to be impacted in the same way. Some groups of workers are more affected than others. For example, workers that have a high physical proximity are going to be more affected. So that wouldn't have been the case before the pandemic, but certainly now physical proximity in terms of working with other people has become an issue since the pandemic. Now, no matter what report you look at, they all show that people will have to change to match the expectations of changing roles. That means to upskill, or they're going to have to change into new occupations. And again, change is the name of the game. Lifelong learning is a key concept. We need that mindset due to the pace of change in the world. We need to keep learning throughout our lives to stay relevant. The shelf life of our skills is getting shorter and shorter, and we need to change or to become irrelevant. Now, the key soft skills, we've looked at these already in the course, things like creativity, new and useful ideas, curiosity to look at things from a different perspective or a different angle, critical thinking, to question the facts, self-management, who you are, what you want, what are your goals, what you want to achieve, your social intelligence, your emotional intelligence, how you connect, how you communicate, how you collaborate with other people, how you listen and respond, how you convince people, your attention management, your time management, how you organize yourself, how you find your natural rhythm, how you focus. All of those skills are really important. And of course, we also need the hard skills specific to your particular job or sector. And we've looked at hard skills and soft skills in the course. So in this lecture, we've learned that the pandemic is accelerating change in the shift to digitization of our economies. Now, the pandemic is accelerating trends we have looked at throughout this course, and in response, we need to change, we need to be ready to upskill, to reskill, and lifelong learning is key to staying relevant. So in the next lecture then, we're going to look at a summary of the section and a brief introduction to section 4. So see you in the next lecture.